Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you again this week. We'll continue our discussion on the international multinational corporations, and this week we'll look into some differences in political, economic, and legal systems. Okay, with me, Eddie Junarsin, I will facilitate your learning, will guide your learning process throughout the semester in this course. Okay, so this is an interesting module or chapter. When we, last week we saw about the globalization, the general globalization idea, the history, and also the process. This week we'll see something more, macroeconomic in nature, like political, economic, and legal systems. And we will begin with the political system here. So I think most of you, and maybe all of us here, we have realized that political systems are evolving. And of course, political system will shape economic and legal systems. I mean, they are interconnected. They are not like mutually exclusive, saying that political system is independent of economic and legal system. I think there's no such thing, in the macroeconomic or in the macro level of a nation or a region, or even at the international level or stage. So there will be an interconnectedness among the political, economic, and legal systems. So here, when we talk about political system, we are talking about the system of government of a nation or a country. And we can look at the political system according to two dimensions here. You can see on the screen, 2 dimensions. So the first one is the, in a spectrum, we have collectivism and individualism, right? On one hand, it's like collectivism, and the other hand, individualism. And another dimension would be, again, another spectrum. You can measure democracy or totalitarianism, right? Whether a nation or a country is more toward democratic or more totalitarian. Okay, so this, you could see that naturally, the 2 dimensions here are interrelated as well, because so a country with more collectivistic nature, collectivistic characters or characteristics are more likely to lean toward, totalitarianism, right? Collectivism and totalitarianism, they work, hand in hand. Not necessarily that extreme, but somehow they are connected. They are moving to the same direction, so to speak. On the other hand, the individualism and democracy or democratic characters usually they exist together. So in real life, we know that large gray area exists, of course, right here in the middle. Especially in modern times, like in the past, we could easily differentiate between countries that were more, for example, collectivistic or totalitarianism, with that kind of ism or belief, and the democratic countries with more individualism. But nowadays it's getting more mixed, more gray area that exists in the middle. That's so true, because I think in modern times, countries are thinking about all kinds of aspects and interests. They want to they want to manage, or they want to take advantage of So if in a certain situation or in certain aspect, maybe a country is more leaning toward, this kind of individualism or democratic, characteristics. But on the other hand, maybe in other aspects or other fields, uh, they use more, the collectivistic type of, political system. So if that could happen, again, in modern times, countries are more rational, more, considering all kinds of aspects, the costs, the benefits, or the pros and cons, and yeah, anything that would affect the results of a system that they want to adopt or adhere to. So let's talk about them, each of us a little bit into more details. Collectivism and individualism. And we begin with collectivism. So it refers to a political system that stresses, the collective goals over individual goals. So you can see the historical account in your textbook as well. So can be traced back to the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. And in modern times, you see this kind of characteristics. Collectivism has been picked up by socialism and communism. You see that on the last point there, in the early 20th century, for example, this ideology has been or was split into two broad camps, two approaches to to achieve the purposes of collectivism. So the first branch would be the communism. So the communists believe that socialism has to be enforced, if necessary, through maybe threats or revolution or dictatorship. So I think this is the to the extreme side of the spectrum, because when we talk about collectivism, somehow every country has maybe a certain proportion, like certain trait of collectivism in every country. But of course, some countries are more leaning toward this ism, like collectivism. And again, the first branch of the collectivism would be the communism, which believe that socialism has to be enforced, has to be complied with, has to be implemented by people in that country, if necessary, through maybe revolution or more violent type of enforcement and totalitarian or dictatorship. Right? We could mention some countries right now in the world that are still implementing the pure type of communism, but of course not so many countries anymore in the world that really implement, really believe and implement the pure form of collectivism, which is the communism. But the second type, you see, is social democrats. The social democrats, you see, somehow they are more committed to achieving socialism by democratic means. So they are not as extreme as the communists in terms of the belief and also implementation of the socialistic ideas. So you could mention, in many countries, maybe in Europe, in Asia, we have this kind of political parties. Like in Europe, in Asia, I'm sure we have social democrats everywhere. So they believe in collectivism to achieve the societal goods or society purposes or something like that. But they try to achieve it using democratic means, maybe by education, by election, by a company, the forms of company like cooperatives and some other means other than violent revolution and totalitarianism or dictatorship. Okay, what about the other side, which is individualism? So this is a philosophy. I think we are quite familiar with it because many countries, or we we can say that most of the countries in the world right now in modern times are, somehow leaning toward this ism, like individualism. So this is a philosophy that believes that individuals should have freedom in pursuing like economic or political purposes or objectives. So this is based on, again, the principle like laissez-faire. So just let freedom has its place to like individual life. And in the original version, or let's say the extreme version of the spectrum, we believe that the purposes of the society, the welfare of the society, would be achieved by allowing individuals in that society to pursue their own self-interest. So we believe that if we give everyone, to pursue his or her own interest, then the welfare or the purposes of the society would be achieved, automatically, because everybody is doing his or her own best to work on something, to achieve something. So the society would be better through that process, by the individual, freedom and self-expression. So we could see here. So interestingly, individualism can be traced to another Greek philosopher. In this case, Plato's disciple, who was Aristotle. So another famous name, right? The Greek philosophers, the Plato and then Aristotle. And we know that this idea has been, has been adopted and implemented by many countries in the world. For example, here in the second point, you can see the United States. I think it's the one of the the most proponent, you can say it that way, most proponent of the preeminent implementer of this ism, right? Individualism. The United States through, for example, the Declaration of Independence, also the daily practices. Although, again, it's very hard right now in every country to generalize everything. Even in the United States, that this kind of the idea of individualism, although we know that this is generally accepted and implemented in a country like the United States, still the level of implementation would be different from one state to another. And that would be the same everywhere, I guess. Certain places, for example, in Western Europe, in Northern Europe, in East Asia, in Southeast Asia, and everywhere, in North America and everywhere in the world, you have like different levels of implementation of any kind of systems, right? Including individualism. So we see the two central characteristics there. So the first one is the emphasis on individual freedom and self-expression. So if we believe in individualism, we give more freedom to individuals. You can pursue your own interests, the type of education, the educational field that you like, the expertise that you want, and then the work, the entrepreneurship, the corporations or anything, right? So more freedom, more self-expression. If you don't like something, or you're not satisfied with anything, you are given the rights to speak up, to complain, to ask for anything, like replacement or something like that. You can imagine. So self-expression, individual freedom. And the second one is, again, the concept of laissez-faire. So welfare of society would be achieved, or would be best served by letting everyone to pursue his or her own economic and political interests, okay? rather than giving the mandates or authorities to maybe governments or public institutions or governmental bodies to regulate the society or dictate what is best for the society. Okay, so again, this is again the pure type of we have seen like collectivism and individualism. and the pure original versions of it. And you can see the development there on the screen. The conflict, ideological conflict between individualism and collectivism now has been shown during the Cold War, when the United States was competing with Soviet Union. Before the Soviet Union, East Germany and other the collectivism bloc or communism bloc fell in 1990, I guess, the late 1980s or early 1990s. So the waning of collectivism was matched by the ascendancy of individualism. This is so true, right? Because once we see that the cornerstone, the building block of a system, in this case collectivism or communism, which was the Soviet Union, fell in the early 90s. Then many of the countries, the countries that used to be part of the Union would find like another alternative. And what would be the other alternative? Of course, it's individualism. So another experiment. So if you follow a certain belief or system and the system fell, then you would like to try another or the other system. So it's not difficult to imagine. It's not no wonder that many of the ex-Soviet Union countries then tried individualism, and you see the political landscape since that time, maybe until now, or see at least until 2005, the individualism had become more and more popular among countries in the world. However, this is quite natural as well. If you have a certain crisis, then you would want to rethink whether the system or the belief that you have been doing so far is accurate, is relevant, or is still relevant. For example, in 2000, after 2005, we know that the financial crisis was happening. In 2005, this was looming. 2008, it really happened in the United States, starting in the United States with the banking crisis on 2008 to 2010. So every time you experience a crisis, you would want to rethink about the system that you have been implementing right now. For example, in 1929, we had the Great Depression. Of course, we didn't live during that era, but we could read from history, in 1929, 1930, there was a Great Depression back then. I know that every country rethought about the economic system that they believed and implemented. And one of the famous, I think, aftermath of the crisis, the Great Depression, was the emergence of Keynesian economics. We had the individualism, the capitalistic type of economic system, the capitalism. Before the Great Depression, we would say that the capitalism was in its purer form, maybe not its purest anymore at that time, but at least purer than it is today, right? Before the Great Depression, a purer form. But when the crisis hit, the whole world, you can say that the whole world, the United Kingdom, for example, they revisited what was happening to the economy, the economic system that they believed in, that they had been using up to that time. And there was an expert, a top scholar, John Maynard Keynes. So he was, somehow came up with a revised version of capitalism. Until today, we call it like Keynesian economics, Keynesian capitalism, which says that in a difficult situation, or in certain aspects or in difficult situations, the government should be more active to interfere in the economy. So in its pure form of capitalism, we're saying that actually the government should play a role of like watchdog, shouldn't interfere in the economy or in the business world. So they should be a regulator, not an economic player, right? Just making regulating bodies, they regulate everything, but they should not play an active role. For example, being like state-owned enterprises or whatever economic players that you could imagine. So in its pure form, should be that way, right? A watchdog, pure regulator. But when Keynesian economics became more and more popular, we realized that in difficult times, some turmoil circumstances, the government is expected or is required to interfere, right? Maybe in a short period of time, temporary interference and something like that. Okay, so you see, like in after the crisis, 2008 to 2010, again, we were asking, right, whether the capitalism or the individualism principles that we had been using up to that time were still relevant, or did we need, certain revisions to the concept, to the belief or systems. That's why every time we have a financial crisis, there will be this kind of thought, this kind of questioning whether the individualism or the capitalism have been excessive, and we should somehow add more aspects of collectivism, the societal welfare, the concepts of prioritizing the goods of the society over individual prosperity or something like that. So this will always happen. So it's saying that as told in the textbook as well, after 2005, maybe some countries are stepping back a bit about the the implementation of individualism or capitalism. So looking back a bit, do we have we been excessive in this kind of implementation or the use of capitalism? Right. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so we'll see the second dimension. So remember, the first dimension is between the collectivism and individualism. The second dimension would be democracy versus totalitarianism. So we'll begin with the democracy, a political system that believe that the government should be from the people, for the people, and by the people, directly or indirectly through elections. You could see in modern times, modern democratic states, of course, they are using representatives, because hard to imagine in this kind of population size we could allow citizens to govern directly. It's unthinkable, like too many people to manage and to allow to speak. So we are using the representative through elections every 4 years or every 5 years, depending on your country. So let's see here to guarantee the accountability of elections or elected representatives. So the ideal democracy will have a number of the safeguards or mechanisms that are usually embedded in the law. You could see each one of them here. Individual rights to freedom of expression, opinion, and organization. So essentially, in this kind of country, democratic countries, people are allowed to express their ideas or opinions or complaints, and to establish organizations, right? All kind of the alliances, organizations in the country. So the right is quite strong and protected, and free media, or at least relatively free media. So this is quite hard to ascertain, because media also have their own biases, of course. Right, media, maybe some news media are more toward certain political parties or certain political spectrum, maybe more socialistic, more capitalistic. Somehow we have the inclination or tendencies, but at least free, right? So in democratic countries, this should be free, although maybe the government, like the ruling government, is from, let's say, more capitalistic side, the ruling government, more capitalistic side, but they should allow free media system in a democratic country. What's the next one? Regular elections. Eligible citizens are allowed to vote. Right? Of course, the eligible citizens, something that could be debated everywhere. I think in the United States, still we're also debating about this one. The the voting mechanism, the absentee ballots and all kinds of the technical mechanisms there. So of course, eligible citizens should be allowed to vote. That's the key in a democratic country, democratic nation. And then universal adult suffrage. Again, suffrage means the right to vote. So adult suffrage, so everyone, women, any ethnics in the nation, and some other differences that you can imagine in a country. So universal adult suffrage, and then limited terms for elected representatives. And this would be different in one country from another. Some countries will use like 5 years, some others will use like 4 years or 6 years. Right. So depending on the election system in your country. And then a fair court system. A fair court system that should be independent from the political system. However, again, this is not necessarily easy to to enforce or even to measure, because somehow if you are a ruling government, you have the opportunity to appoint people everywhere in the court system. Maybe in the Supreme Court right now in the United States, the president is prepared to nominate a replacement in the Supreme Court. Also in the maybe federal courts, in some other lower level courts. So everywhere in the world, if you're a ruling government, then you have somehow the opportunity, the authority to at least nominate or even to appoint the officers in the court systems. But this is expected to be independent, right, in a democratic country. So if you're elected or if you're appointed to be, let's say, a judge or a justice maybe, then it's expected that you are independent, although you are nominated or appointed by the president or the governor or someone who has authority in your state or in the federal level, but you're expected to be independent, right, for the greater benefit of people and the country. But it's not easy to ascertain or to enforce. Then non-political state bureaucracy, again, similar, difficult to measure, difficult to enforce as well. Also this one, non-political police force and armed forces. So this should be true because for example, if police academy, it depends on your country again. In many countries, the police is like at the federal level. So there is a police academy that you have to go for maybe 3 years or 4 years. So when you graduate, you become like second lieutenant, just the same as the armed forces. You have the army, the Navy, the Marine, Air Force, or something like that, right? So you go to the federal level academies, and if you graduate, you become a second lieutenant. In other countries, it might be quite different for the police force. In the United States, I think the system would be at the state level, right? The sheriff, for example, the state level, and have the like counties. So it's not at the federal level, except something like the FBI, right? The Bureau of Investigation, that would be at the federal level. But wherever it is, the police force and again the armed forces, they are expected to be non-political, to be independent. So they serve the country, not a certain political party or the ruling government. But again, this is not that easy to ascertain or again to enforce, because you know that for example, the commanders, the commanders of whatever army, navy, marine, and other other branches would be appointed by the commander in chief. And who is that? Commander in chief is of course the president, right? Or maybe the king in certain countries. So yeah, somehow there's a political position as well, like the commanders or the chiefs of staff. But in certain countries, they have like chiefs of staff of army, marine, navy, and air force, and they have maybe a commander of the armed forces. So only one commander, but many chiefs of staff, or many commanders and one chief of staff, a joint chiefs of staff or something like that. But whatever it is, yeah, we want to make sure that the military and the police are independent to serve the country. So it's not that political. It should be quite neutral. And then relatively free access to state information. Yeah, this is, I think, one key tenets, key characteristics of democratic countries. But free access to information. So it's not like a state without clear information about the economy or certain statistics or something. So if you're a democratic country, you should provide more and more information to reduce the asymmetric information, because asymmetric information will create somehow some chaos, maybe in the financial markets, in politics as well, and in other aspects, other sides of the society. What about the other side here? Totalitarianism. So they believe that this is a form of government where one person or one political party could exercise absolute control over, like people's lives, the society, the politics, the economy, the social, right, the technology and everything. So they believe that a person or a certain political party should have the control over everything. So we could see that this could be divided into several types nowadays. The first one is purest form would be the communism, the communist totalitarianism, right? Communism. So not so many countries right now are using the pure form of communism. It's in decline, of course. We would say that in terms of the political system, communism is still implemented in like China, Vietnam, Laos, North Korea, Cuba, maybe some other countries that are not listed here. But again, this is in politics, okay? We're not talking about the economy. This is about the politics. So the pure form is communism. And then we could see the second type is the theocratic totalitarianism. You see some religious countries like Saudi Arabia. You see the case study on that one, like Saudi Arabia or Iran, maybe some other countries as well. they are based on, you know, like religious belief. So the totalitarianism is based on religion rather than communism or collectivism. Then another type would be the tribal totalitarianism. Maybe you could see some examples here, like some countries like Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, and maybe some other countries. And another type, see the right-wing totalitarianism. I think this appeared. This has appeared since maybe before the Second World War. This kind of totalitarianism, but they were not communist. I could say something like in during the Second World War, we have the ultra nationalistic movements, right? In for example, in Germany, to the Nazi or maybe some other countries. I think everywhere somehow, yeah, there is certain parts of the society that believe in this one. But again, the totalitarianism here is not based on the collectivism or communism, but it's more toward, you know, certain belief, right? In, I don't know, maybe combination, right? Theocratic or tribal. They believe in a certain group of people, a group of certain group of belief. They permit, you see here, individual economic freedom, certain freedom there, but they typically they restrict individual political freedom. So if we have this kind of totalitarianism, so everybody in that nation or country has to follow, you know, the same type of belief. But this is not communism, right? So not the type of communism, but just another type of collectivism or totalitarianism. Okay, so we have seen the political systems. So we'll move to economic systems now. And of course, political ideology and economic systems are connected. So they affect one another. Although we know that in many countries right now, they have not really synchronous political and economic systems. For example, in China, right, politically, China is still, you know, using the communism, but politically, the totalitarianism in its purest form, the communism. However, in its economic system, they have been more and more open. Even hard to differentiate China in terms of, you know, economic system from the capitalistic countries. It's already very open, right? You could see here in countries where individual goals are given primacy over, you know, the societal or collective goals, we are more likely to find a market-based economic system. This is so true, right? So usually in a more, you know, democratic country, it's more likely to implement market-based economic system or more capitalistic system, right? Typically, or no, normally or naturally. However, again, in modern times, we could combine everything that we deem beneficial or advantageous to the country. But again, in the natural form, you know, natural combination, you see that in countries where collectivism is the major system politically, then they are more likely to implement this kind of, you know, communistic economic system as well. Okay, so more, you know, centrally controlled by the government, and the government will play a big role, not only as a regulator but also as an economic player by having many maybe state-owned enterprises or government bodies that also trade and something like that. So we'll begin with the market economy. Again, market economy is more likely found in democratic countries. Also, in this kind of economy, the market-based economy or more liberal economy or capitalistic economy, all productive activities are privately owned, in its purest form. So the factors of production are owned by private, right? Private individuals or corporations. Okay, so they are not owned by the government. Right? Production is determined by the demand and supply mechanism. We call it a demand and supply mechanism. This is like going back to the founding fathers of capitalism, like Adam Smith, David Ricardo, Thomas Malthus, and some other founding fathers. Right? So demand and supply mechanism. They believe, right, the market economy, countries, they believe that monopoly could pose a big threat, a big danger to the working of a market economy. So monopoly will create like inefficiency, unfairness, something like that. Right? So you can imagine that if someone or a single company could monopolize a market, then the company could determine prices, and consumers will have to pay for higher prices and maybe lower quality or subpar quality because the company doesn't have any competitors, so they don't need to strive for the keyword there. They don't have the motivation to innovate, come up with better products, cheaper prices or anything because they monopolize, or at least they're like oligopolistic market, the oligopoly of the economic players. That's considered not good, right, to the market economy because certain a syndicate of producers could influence prices, could somehow just offer certain quality and doesn't think about the innovations to improve the quality and for the higher satisfaction of their customers or consumers. So what is the role of the government in its purest form? It is to encourage vigorous, free and fair competition. So it's like to maintain the level of playing field for everybody, right? To ensure like fairness, free and fair play, competition among the producers. For example, by enacting the antitrust laws and some other related regulations to ensure that the competition is fair, so the economy would be efficient, would be innovative, with high quality products, cheaper prices, and something like that. Okay, so this is in its purest form. What about the opposite system, the command economy? So again, this is its purest form. They believe that the government has to control everything, control the, like for example, the production, so they plan the goods and services that a country should produce, the quantity in which they are produced, and also the prices. So they think that the government should control for, again, the products, the prices, also the quantity. So again, this is in its purest form. So what is the rationale behind this belief? So they're saying that the good of society. So in their in their vision, they want a uniform society, with the same level of wealth, not having a group of people with like abundant wealth and the others with like poor conditions or something. Again, this is the ideal form, the dream, the vision, but in reality, it's very hard to really attain to the ultimate goal of having this kind of society, because even if you see maybe certain countries with the implementation of this pure form of command economy, actually the elites, right, the political elites, they are enjoying not abundant life, right, abundant riches. You can see what was happening in like North Korea, for example. The common people are poor. they lack food, nutrition. They're under, uh, underserved in terms of food, entertainment, even education, and some basic things, right? Basic necessities. But if you look at the political elites, like the president or the ministers, the political elites in general, you can see that they live abundant life. That's quite sad to see. Like even in a pure command economy country, we don't see that this is attained. This is not easily achieved, right? Because somehow the political elites, they want to live better life than the other parts of the country or other other groups of society. Not supposed to be that way, right? It feels from like everybody should have like the same living standard or living quality. Historically here, command economies, they go hand in hand with the communist countries or collectivism in its purest form as well. So again, the communistic countries are more likely to have the command economies, like collectivistic or controlled economies as well. Many of the countries have shifted from this pure communism to more open economy, because they know that they couldn't survive by sticking to the command economy, right? Because there's no innovation, no development, because it's very difficult to trade with other countries with this kind of communism. You don't allow other countries to send their products here, then other countries will not allow you to send your products there. It's like, remember the principle that we saw in the globalization discussion, like the beggar thy neighbor principle, the retaliation. And command economies tend to stagnate. This is so too. See, like state-owned enterprises, like the government-owned companies or enterprises, we have little incentive to like control costs or to be efficient, because they can't get out of they can't go out of business. If something happens, they would just ask for equity injection by the government. You understand that some of you come from somehow your countries. I'm sure many of you, your countries still have this kind of system, like state-owned enterprises. Maybe not to the extreme of communism, but many countries still have state-owned enterprises, and you can see how they work. Right? They don't have much incentive to be efficient. They know that they can't go broke. If something happens, they will ask for equity injection from the government. And also the second reason here, the abolition of private ownership means that individuals also have no incentive to look for better ways of doing business, to enhance customer satisfaction and something like that. Right? So there's most likely there's not much motivation for innovating or even creativity. But again, in reality, right now we see like many of the countries are implementing like mixed economic system, a mixed economy. So not pure communism, not pure capitalism either. So we are mixing everything. Even in maybe in Western Europe, you can see that it's more toward capitalism, but there are certain aspects of command economy that still prevail. Right? Also in other countries, I'm sure in East Asia, in Southeast Asia. I would say that, for example, in the United States, it's more. Maybe it's an exception. Right? In the United States, it's like highly to the capitalistic system. I would say maybe 98 or 99%. But in other countries, there have been like melting pot system, right? The mixture. Maybe in South Korea, you can see South Korea is in general, basically more toward capitalistic system, but in certain aspects, they have like the command system. Maybe certain industries are being controlled by the government. And of course, in a country like the United States, also the government still have some I don't know, the agencies, for example, even in financial markets, the government still has like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae, the mortgage associations, the government agencies. So somehow there's no country in the world that is implementing 100% capitalism or 100% communism. But of course, every country will be tilted toward communism or capitalism, but most of them are mixing. Can see another example here. I think this is the opposite way. 1980s, according to the story here, the UK, France, Sweden were mixed economies, but nowadays the privatization has been prevalent. Has existed now more and more, has been prevalent everywhere. So consequently, it has reduced like state ownership of businesses. So more and more private firms rather than government-owned enterprises. But still, in certain aspects, governments still hold on to big ownership. Maybe because those industries are like protected industries in those countries, like weaponry, maybe agriculture or something like that, which are quite like pivotal to those countries. Okay, this is quite interesting. Like in 2008, early 2009, I remember, that was the end of George Bush and the beginning of Obama, so a transition time, and the crisis hit the United States. And this banking crisis was quite scary at the time. There were more than 900 banks bailed out by the government. So being bailed out means the government injected money to those banks by holding preferred stocks of the banks. So the government was holding like preferred stocks of the bank. They injected money there. They call it the TARP, Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP. So we could see, for example, here the U.S. government was taking over like 80% stake in AIG, the insurance firm, because they considered AIG to be like too big to fail. So they were concerned that if those big banks or financial institutions collapse together, then the economy might collapse as well. So they call it like too big to fail. So somehow, even in a country like the United States, they don't really implement the pure capitalism. But we still believe that, if certain industry is experiencing like crisis or severe turmoil, then the government has to interfere by bailing out or giving money or something like that. So somehow still there's concern about that. I mean, if you imagine, right, in a pure capitalistic system, the government should not interfere anything. So you could say that because that was the mistake of those banks, just let them collapse. That would be the belief of the pure capitalism. But you see what happened? Even the US government didn't believe that, right? They didn't believe that the financial institution industry should be allowed to collapse, because the country would be at risk. That could pose a big danger to the country if we allow the financial institutions to collapse together. So again, right, this is the sign of like mixed system rather than pure capitalism or pure communism. Okay, I hope this is quite like straightforward, and we have seen in your, life experiences, in your work experiences as well, in your countries, and yeah, you're traveling everywhere. I'm sure, right? You are in South Korea, or you go back to the United States or Mexico, Sweden, Finland, from the countries you are from. Yeah, you could imagine in your life experience, right? Through your life experience. Now we'll shift to the legal systems. So we have seen the political and economic systems. Now we are talking about legal systems. So this is quite straightforward. This is about the law system in a certain country. And of course, every country has different legal systems. Similar to the economic system, the legal system is also affected by the political system. So there is a tendency, right? Tendency, if you utilize the, let's say, communistic system, then your legal system tends to be in a certain way, and vice versa. If you are a democratic country, then your legal system tends to be more democratic, so to speak, right? So they are connected. But this is very important one, could affect the attractiveness of the country, right? Because remember in modern times, the flow of money will always go to more attractive places. It's just like water, like water will go from a higher place to a lower place. Similarly, in that analogy will apply as well, like in the flow of money. So money will always go to attractive places or countries or regions. Right? So it will affect the attractiveness of foreign direct investment or something like that. So again, legal system refers to the rules, the laws that regulate behavior and actions, okay, and the process of how the laws are enforced, like through the court system or through the whatever that apply in that country. So we'll see the different legal systems. Different legal systems here. We could divide into three major systems here. The first one is the common law. So this is based on tradition, precedent, and custom. So you could see that the name common law, right? Common, the tradition, precedent, and custom. So this is usually adopted, right? Not necessarily similar or the same, although let's say several countries are using the common law, but still there are many differences there. But common law is mostly adopted by by countries or regions that used to be part of the British Empire. For example, England and Ireland, Scotland, of course, and the adjacent countries. The United States, Canada, Australia, Singapore, India. You can imagine the ex-British Empire, right? The countries, Malaysia as well, Pakistan, and some other countries that have historical connection to the British Empire. What is it again? Based on tradition, precedent, and custom. So in other words, this system doesn't really rely on the books or the codes. For example, the books of maybe criminal law, right? Criminal law, or I don't know, the civil type of law, right? Criminal, civil, also military, and some other things. So they don't rely too much on the books, right? They rely more on tradition, precedent, and custom. So for example, in that country, if you are caught because of bribery, Then they will look at the precedent, what happened in the past, maybe last year or several months ago, there was someone doing the same thing that you are doing or you just did, and that guy was punished with like, I don't know, like $500,000 or imprisonment for 2 years. Then most likely, you know, the jury, if they decide that you are guilty, then the judge would give you about 2 years because there is a precedent to that case. According to common law, like this is the case is decided by the jury, consisting of, I don't know, like 15 jurors, 11, 15 or something like that. But the punishment, you know, the severity of punishment is decided by a judge, right? By the judge. What about the second one, the civil law? Civil law, this is based on books or codes, right? Again, the codes for criminal law, codes for civil law, and something like that. So the civil law system, we have some famous, another famous name, like the Roman law, because most of them, came from the Roman Empire in the past, and I think the most recent name for it would be the Napoleonic codes, because during the Napoleon time, I think he was revising many of the codes. So also famous or renowned as the Napoleonic codes and the civil law that many European and also some part of the Asian countries are adopting right now. So some countries, they are using the combination between common law and civil law. I'm not sure. I think in South Korea, you are allowed to use, in the court system, you could use the civil law system with judges. So the judges will examine and determine the case, whether whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty, and the judges also will determine the severity of the punishment if the person or the organization is found guilty. So the judges are so powerful in the civil law, and they are based on the codes, right, or the books. So things have been mentioned in quite details in the codes, right, in the books. For example, it would be written, if you kill someone intentionally, like the punishment would be between like 5 years to death penalty, for example. If you bribe someone, then the penalty would be so and so, and yeah, something like that. Theocratic law, we don't see many cases adopting this theocratic law anymore because many of the countries have somehow incorporated the theocratic concepts into their laws. For example, we can't deny the fact that for example, in Western civilization, we have the somehow the Christian values there. So many parts of the Bible, maybe the good things taught in the Bible, and bad things not allowed or not encouraged in the Bible have been incorporated in the law, right? For the, let's say, the Western civilization. Maybe in the Eastern civilization, like in Korea, in China, in Japan, in Taiwan, in Vietnam, and other countries, like the Eastern culture, I think they have incorporated for example, the teachings of Confucianism or Taoism, right? Something like that in the law. But again, we don't see cases of pure, implementing the pure theocratic law. We don't see that existing anymore in modern times. Okay, differences in contract law. So we delve into the details of the legal system. The first one is contract law. So contract, of course, This is a famous term, like contract. It's like you are making a binding document, a binding covenant or agreement with your counterparty. So you exchange something, right? You exchange, maybe you provide services or you sell goods or whatever products, and you will get maybe money in return. So you have what? Rights and obligations there of the parties involved, or the counterparties. What are the differences here between the common law and the civil law systems with respect to the contract law? So we could see that naturally, because the common law, once again, common law rely less on the codes or the books. So every time, if you are in a country with common law system, the covenant or the agreement must be like more detailed. So you make more detailed contracts, because you know that under the common law system or framework, you don't rely too much on the existing books or codes of law. So every time you make an agreement, you try to be more specific, more detailed there. But on the other hand, if you go to a civil law system, the Napoleonic codes or the Roman law, something like that, you know that many things, so almost everything has been regulated in the codes or the books. So when you create a contract with your counterparty, you could, somehow you could feel that you don't need a lengthy contract anymore, because if something happens, you have the codes. You also have, I think, the arbitrage, agency or body that will, mediate the disputes or something like that, and also the courts. So you have the arbitrage agency, you have the courts at many levels, so multi-level courts, and you also have the courts. Okay, so contracts tend to be less lengthy in this country. But you know what's interesting, right? In research, because I'm specializing in corporate finance and governance as well. So research shows that countries implementing common law have higher investor protection, or tend to have higher investor protection. Right? That's quite interesting one. This is out of our context right now, but it's good to know. Right? So common law is famous for higher investor protection, and that will affect your the corporate governance system that the companies will implement in that country. And in the international standard, we have this one, CISG, the Contracts for International Sales of Goods. So UN Convention on CISG. So it will tell you the set of rules governing certain aspects of making and the performance of commercial contracts and something like that. The next type is the property rights and corruption. See, what's the meaning of property? Property, that's something you have. So the property means what? Resources, right? Or a resource. So property rights means your rights, your legal rights to the use and the income produced by that resource. It could be anything, right? It could be your land, your factory, also could be your intellectual property, right? Intellectual property rights could be part of it as well. So we're talking about what is property. Property is actually, you could say, your asset or your wealth. So property rights would be the right to the use and the income produced by that resource or asset. So countries would differ in legal systems in the extent of protection, right? The extent to which the property rights are protected by the law. Some violation examples here. Examples of violation could be private action like theft, piracy. you don't want to buy a certain software package and you decide to download it illegally from somewhere, from the website sharing system or something. Blackmailing included here by individuals or organizations. Second type of violation would be by the public action and corruption. For example, here public officials like politicians or bureaucrats, they do the extortion, like they extort anything, right? Your income, resources, for your income, the resources, for your property, right? They could do extortion. They corrupt, okay, could be, or they just could take over something, right? That's part of property right violation. You know that in certain countries, these are more prone to happen than the others, of course. So some countries are stronger in protecting property rights. Some other countries are weaker. That's the fact, right, in the world. So, of course, you could easily imagine and guess that money would flow to places or countries with like higher right protection, including property rights, of course, right? Foreign offenses here, for example, the Corrupt Practices Act enacted by the United States in 1970s and the OECD's Convention on Combating Bribery of Foreign Public Officials. So again, they purport to improve the governance by many countries at the world stage. So it would be giving the same opportunities, more fair opportunities to many countries to enjoy the capital inflows. Right? The next one, intellectual property. Again, is essentially part of property rights, but more about intellectual property. You could imagine whenever you talk about intellectual property, what comes to mind will be something like computer software, screenplay by the documents, music score, chemical formula, even the mathematical formula as well, or medical, right, for new drug and something like that, right? So we could divide into like three types here. A patent, we have inventor. If you invent, you find something like through your research and development, you invent something, then you could register this one to the patent office in your country or the international patent office, or you could simply register your inventions in many patent offices in many countries, not only in your country, because maybe you are convinced that this product could be sold in many countries, so you want to make sure that there won't be piracy in those countries. So you register your patent also in those countries, in their patent offices. So this will give you like exclusive rights to like the use, the manufacture, the use, the sales of that invention. So they will, if another company wants to use your finding, your invention, they have to pay you the royalty. For example, it would be like 7% of the selling price, like the what's that? The patent royalty, right? Would be 7% of the selling price after deducting maybe the tax and also the patent maintenance expense. Okay, for just an example, maybe in certain country. The second type is copyrights. Of course, copyrights. If you hear of the word copyrights, then you will identify the word with like author or authorship, like authors, composers, playwrights, artists, and publishers. So, oh, by the way, usually a big patent will last for 20 years, a big patent, major patent. A minor patent will last for 13 years. So depending on the scale of the patent. What about copyrights? I think copyrights usually would give you like a long time, a lengthy time. It's like 75 years after the death of the person, or the author or the composer, yeah, something like that, the publisher or something like that. So it's quite long, like 75 years after the death of that author or that individual, that composer or something like that. So it's quite long. Right? What about trademarks? Trademarks are related to like design, name, that have been registered. So if you know that a certain name has been registered as a trademark, then you can't use that trademark to sell your products, because you would be, you'll be sued. You'll be asked, maybe firstly in a nice way. They will send you a letter asking you to change the name. They give you maybe a month or two to change the name. Otherwise, they will sue you to the court. They'll bring you to the court, and there will be a legal, legal fight in the court if you want to rebut or something like that. For example, famous trademarks like Samsung, of course, right? In Korea, Samsung, LG, Hyundai, Kia, like some famous brands, or Christian Dior, Louis Vuitton, like some other famous brands from everywhere in the world, IKEA, something like that. So I have patent, copyright, trademark, and again, the protection of intellectual property rights would differ from one country to another. Although we have this kind of treaty, World Intellectual Property Organization, and the Paris Convention for the protection of industrial property. Then product safety and product liability, still part of protection. Okay, the product safety and product liability. So product safety laws would be different one country to another. So it sets certain safety standards that a product must adhere to. So for example, we're talking about the automotive industry, right? In a certain country, this kind of safety standard is so high. So you will see many, many producers or companies are recalling many a time in a year. For example, I think in Japan, in the United States, they have high standards. So you see, Cadillac was recalling certain components, and then the month after, another component is called by another brand and something like that. In other countries, this might not be that strong, so we don't see many, recalling of products, of this kind of legal or litigation, suing by customers or something like that, right? So it depends on the standard of this kind of safety. What about this one, the product liability? So it relates to injury, death, or damage because of the consumption of that product. Again, right? Product liability. For example, you drive a car and out of the blue, like you hit a tree, and you find out that you couldn't brake, couldn't press the brake or something like that. Right? So you hit a tree or you crash into another car or something, then you might be thinking of suing the company, the producer or something like that, because of the product liability law that allows you to do so. So we have like two types of product liability laws. Again, the criminal criminal liability and civil liability. Okay, I think it's the same in every country, both in the common law system and in the civil law system. So we have criminal liability that would result in fines and or imprisonment. And for example, there's a suspicion that this happens because of I don't know, like deliberate, deliberate action, right? Intentional action. Then this would be a criminal liability, right? But there's for example, again, intentional action by someone in the factory, right? Or in the factory or in the distribution place or anything, then this would certainly this would result in imprisonment. But if that happens because of, I don't know, the negligence maybe, or other unintentional causes, then maybe they would end up here, like monetary damages, just payment for settlement or something like that, right? So you can imagine it depends on the case. So country differences, you could see here, countries with extensive liability laws might cause businesses to be more costly, right? This is, I think, maybe not that appropriate to say less competitive, because it somehow it conveys like dual messages, right? On the one hand, this kind of country, like with extensive liability laws, this is quite good for for governance, right? That this kind of product liability is highly protected in that country. So on the one hand, this is a positive thing, right? So you have to protect your consumers. You always have to innovate, to be creative, to come up with solutions before the problem happens. For example, if you are a car manufacturer in the United States or in some strong product safety or the product liability law, you have to make sure that before someone crashes or hits a tree or something, then you have to come up with new innovations, new findings that how to protect the transmission, the brake, the steering, the LED lights and something like that, right? So on one hand, this is a positive thing. Of course, on the other hand, there's a trade-off there. There's a dilemma there. It would be more costly. If you do business in such countries, maybe you have to pay more. So you have to pay for liability insurance. Then your product prices might be higher. So I have to sell them higher, right? So always a dilemma there. So hard to say whether this would be undesirable to companies, because there's a positive thing as well to this kind of policy. But the second point here is quite interesting, or even more relevant here, the ethical issue. For example, if you go abroad, right? If you're a Korean company, you go to maybe another country. Maybe you're going to another country with more relaxed policy, right? Relaxed law, or more less stringent product liability law. What would you do? Will you stick with your home country standards, or will you just adjust to the local standards that are less stringent or more relaxed? This is an ethical question. I mean, supposedly you have to stick with a higher standard. So in this case, maybe your home country standard is higher. So you're supposed to stick to stick with to a higher standard. Right? But again, for the pragmatic reasons, maybe you will compromise by somehow relaxing a bit, because that you are in such country that that does not have strong product liability law, or not as strong as the law back home. Right? And then the last part here, the managerial implications. You can imagine like of course, the macro environment, that it affects everything. It affects market attractiveness. You can see, for example, the political, economic, and legal systems would always raise ethical issues, like the crucial ethical issues that would implicate the practices. If you go there, if you go somewhere, what is the political system, the economic and legal systems as well in that country? How would you adapt? And in a certain aspect, you might want to adhere to your higher standards at home, and some of them you will compromise by adapting there or something like that. So this would affect everything from your production, human resource policy, your financial management as well, and of course the marketing, right? So overall, right? So in summary, the benefits, costs, and risk associated with doing business in a country, yeah, they are a function of everything there: the macro environment, the political, economic, and legal systems. And this is quite interesting one, right? The last point here. Although we know that we prefer a democratic country and also a more liberal or a capitalistic country, in other words, a market-based economic system is preferable. But the reality in modern times is more complex, more dynamic. For example, you see here China, right, or even Vietnam, right? They may not be, not a democratic country like China or Vietnam. They are not democratic countries. They don't use the market economies. Somehow they're still like maybe in the middle, although they're more open than they're supposed to be, more open than they're supposed to be as this kind of communist countries, right? Their economies are quite open, but not, of course, not pure capitalistic economy or market-based economy. But still, what's happening here? Almost every companies, if you want to achieve like production efficiency, you want to take advantage of lower labor costs, cheaper prices, then you will go to China, to Vietnam, maybe to Laos as well, to Southeast Asia, to maybe other parts of the world, like Africa and other places. Why? Because you're seeing opportunities there. Because now it has been, again, a mixed economy, right? Not purely, a combination of communistic political system and command economy. There's, not that way anymore, but we are seeing a combination. For example, in China, there's a combination of communistic political economy with an open economy, right? Relatively open economy. So with this kind of mixture or mixed economy, we are seeing that countries like China, Vietnam offer a lot of opportunities, because if you go there, we are doing business there, we'll just be doing fine as long as we don't talk about the political political dispute, or criticizing the government, or like provoking maybe people, like something like that, right? If you just go there, we do business, they will let you do business. You can achieve, I don't know, the production efficiency, again, the lower labor cost, maybe higher talents as well, right? In certain aspects, like more talents, maybe easier financial management, easier financing by financial institutions there, or the capital markets there, and other reasons. Okay, so it has been a more dynamic decision nowadays, but as to your decision, whether you want to go there or you want to go somewhere else, or you want to stay in your region, or you want to go to unknown regions to capitalize on opportunities there, something like that. Okay, so I think that's our discussion points today. So I hope you you get the ideas here about the differences in terms of political, economic, and legal systems. And yeah, I'll be happy to discuss with you. And thank you for watching this video. See you soon in the next program. Thank you.